Hello! Okay, so as you can tell by the title of today's video, we are going to be talking about how to survive living with a roommate, because having a roommate can be extremely stressful. So today I have compiled a list of a few tips and tricks that should help you with your first time living with someone new. The very first tip that I have for surviving living with a roommate is just get to know each other if possible, because a lot of times some people get randomly assigned to people, but if you have the chance to, try your best to communicate with your roommate. I know before I came to college, for example, I tried to establish contact with the person who I was rooming with, who we actually ended up hitting it off really well. I'm gonna link her channel somewhere over here. I don't know where it's gonna be at. Okay, so a huge thing that I feel like a lot of people don't really think about when you're first moving into your apartment or house or dorm with other people is that you need to establish boundaries early. It does not matter if you're rooming with your best friend from back home, if you're moving with your cousin or some random stranger who was just assigned to you by your university. You need to establish your boundaries early. And I say this because you don't want to just not say anything and let stuff go past until it's 4 months in when you're living together and you're both being passive aggressive and leaving little sticky notes to each other about things that you could have easily clarified in the beginning. So that's why I say it's always best to establish those boundaries early, no matter what they may be for you. I think establishing those boundaries in the beginning when you don't really know each other, so there aren't any harsh feelings, is gonna be a lot easier than trying to establish those boundaries 7 months in when you kind of know each other and are more comfortable, and then all of a sudden it seems like you're coming out of nowhere with all these sort of rules and regulations. So that's why I say in the beginning, it's easier to just get it out the way, because nobody's gonna be seen as the bad guy or the mean person if you talk about it before it's even out there. Ask the key questions about room temperature, relationships, and lights. Okay, so those seem like 3 very basic things, but I promise you, they can make your rooming situation awful. Even in cases where it's a close friend that you're moving into an apartment with or something like that, you still can run into things like that, because living with someone is totally different from being friends with them. So I say room temperature because that can start a lot of arguments. Relationships, I think relationships are a very important thing that people should bring up when it comes to having a roommate. For example, my roommate had a relationship and we discussed it, and it was totally fine if their person came over, as long as it was communicated beforehand. And it was the same for me, if I were to date somebody or bring them back to the room, as long as it's communicated, make sure that the other person's cool with it, and it was fine. But I know, especially for a dorm, it's 2-3 people smushed into a small room, and a lot of times navigating having a significant other could be hard. So I will say, make sure you establish that boundary in the beginning about rules when it comes to inviting other people over, or romantic partners over, or if you want to have the room to yourself to do whatever you want to do, make sure that's communicated in the beginning. And so the final one for that little thing I gave you would be lights. It is so important to talk about lights. Okay, some people like to keep their lights on very late at night. Some people like to have night lights. Some people like complete darkness. And if you guys are not on the same page about something as simple as lights, I promise you can have a huge disagreement. Because if you're the type of person who likes to sleep in complete darkness and your roommate is the type of person who wants to leave on 30,000 lights, you're gonna have a hard time. And luckily my roommate and I, we were pretty much on the same page. we would both cut the lights out and we would be perfectly fine in complete darkness, which worked for us, but that might not work for everybody. Some people might be scared of the dark. Some people just might be more comfortable going to sleep with the TV on or something just for the extra light. That's why I say discuss those 3 things: room temperature, relationships, and lights, because I promise you that will make your experience living with someone else so much better. A kind of common sense one for me is just keep common shared spaces clean. That's the easiest way to avoid arguments with your future roommates or suite mates. Like if you're moving into an apartment together and then like the other person's a total slob and then the other one's a complete neat freak, you're gonna run into some issues. So if you know that you're a messier person, or like your room where you're from is kind of messy, then try to take, in the beginning at least, try to take a little bit more extra caution to making sure you're not leaving a complete mess. Okay, so a very important thing when it comes to having a roommate, you need to remember that it's not your room, it's our room. Okay? And I know for people who aren't used to sharing rooms with people, like not even other family members, it can be kind of hard to remember that it's not just your room, it's now our room. It's kind of hard for people who have never really lived with other people or had experience with living with people who are outside of your immediate family. But just remember that this is a shared space. You might be used to keeping your music on like for super loud for really long, or like you're probably used to, you know, doing all this stuff, but remember that there is another person living with you now that may not be used to that. Okay, so a very important thing when it comes to surviving living with a roommate is learn how to read a room. It is just basic common people skills that you need right now. Learn how to be empathetic and learn how to read a room. If your roommate came back to the room or the house, whatever, and they look completely distraught and they're like bawling, crying, maybe, just maybe, it's okay to like turn off your video game for a few seconds, ask if they're okay, or even just leave the space and let them have the room to themselves or whatever. And I say this because this is very important and a lot of people forget, and it goes back to this is our room, not your room anymore, because you do want to have compassion for the other person. Like if they look like they've had a really rough day and they just need time alone and you're in there like having a super loud jam session, learn when to turn the music off and just take a step back. And I feel like this will help a lot of people, because you would want someone to do the same for you. If you were tired, if you were crying or whatever, going through some things, you would hope that your roommate would have that type of compassion for you to maybe put what they're doing on hold for a little minute for you. So do the same for them. And I'm not saying completely give up your space for them every single time, but I'm saying just be considerate. And just communicate. Open communication is very helpful. I noticed that helped my roommate and I last semester. You want to be treated with the same type of respect, so make sure you're giving that respect for their space as well. Okay, and so the final tip for surviving living with a roommate would be, don't expect to become best friends, but also try to get acquainted with them. So I say don't expect to become best friends because we see all the time in like almost every single chick flick or movie, a bunch of people move in and they're like the best of friends. They're always having face mask night and always watching movies together and doing this and doing that. The reality of the situation is a lot of times very different. Sometimes moving in with a random person will not always be your best friend, but I mean, for the most part, it's just a living situation. And even when it comes to living with friends or people that you know from back home or wherever, sometimes even living with your friends, don't expect to, just because you're living with them, that you're gonna be like the best of buddies and you're gonna be together nonstop 24/7. because people have lives. 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a living situation, not finding your long lost soulmate friend. So don't get your feelings hurt if it's nothing like that, because I promise it's not you. You're not doing anything wrong. It's not like you're weird or people don't want to be friends with you. It's a living situation. And again, even if it is somebody that you do kind of know a little bit better, that people have their own lives and it's okay. It's nothing you're doing wrong. But I do say make an effort to get acquainted with the person that you're going to be living with, because if you don't know who you're moving in with, you want to make sure that you're not just living with a complete stranger where to the point where you feel kind of uncomfortable like going into your own space, because again, it's our room, not just your room. So you want to be comfortable in that room that you're sharing with someone else. So do try to make some type of an effort to get acquainted. Like if you're just moving into college and you don't really know too many people, the first person you're going to be seeing is going to be your roommate. So why not make an effort to try to talk to them? A lot of people do find really good friends in their roommates. So you never know until you try. But again, don't go into it expecting that this is going to be your best friend for the rest of your life and the rest of your college career, or for the rest of the time that you're living in that city that you had a sweet mate or whatever. You know, it is what it is. But I don't know. Those are just a few things that I had wished that I had known about before living with another person. Getting a new roommate can be kind of stressful, but I promise if you follow some of those little helpful tricks and tips, it can make it a little bit better. So if you're moving into a new apartment, new house, a dorm, good luck. I hope that you have a successful roommate time. I know I did, just by doing those few small things, just like communication and stuff. All right, if you have any other tips that you would like to share with the people about how you survived living with a roommate, make sure you comment them down below. Make sure you like this video and subscribe and ring the little notification bell so that you can stay updated on everything that I post. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Bye.